Padres, solamente queremos dejarles saber que vamos a estar grabando la reunión de hoy. Así que por favor sepan que vamos a estar grabando la reunión y publicándola en nuestra página web.
Mr. Martinez, do you want to just make Ms. Hall a co-host too in case
Sure.
she needs to unmute herself? And we are recording now.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It's so happy to see some parents this morning. We do understand that this is an early morning, so thank you for joining us. That means you're real troopers and you really want to know what is going on with our full reopening in the next couple of weeks. On behalf of the high school administration, I want to welcome you and I thank you for your continued partnership with us as we, continue to navigate this exceptional and unusual year for sure.
Bienvenidos, padres de familia. Buenos días. Sabemos que es bastante temprano y le damos las gracias por estar con nosotros de parte de la administración de la escuela. El tenerlos aquí significa que están muy interesados en recibir información sobre la reapertura de la escuela. Muchísimas gracias por todo el apoyo que nos han dado en estos meses tan difíciles para nosotros.
Okay. So as I stated last night at the other reopening meeting, I wanted to just make note that the plans you'll hear today are not isolated or remained in a vacuum between just the administration. It was actually a collaboration between administrators, teachers, parents, and students that are part of our building reopening committee, but also with the additional collaboration with the district-wide reopening committee, not only just most recently, but throughout this past year. So I wanted to make sure that I'm not going to take full credit for this. This was a collaboration between all of our stakeholders in our school community.
Entonces queremos dejarles saber que los planes que escucharán en la mañana de hoy no fueron diseñados solamente por los administradores. Fue un comité que incluía administración, pero también padres de familia, estudiantes, maestros. Habían dos comités, uno en la escuela y uno en todo el distrito, que se encargaron de hacer los planes necesarios para poder recibir nuevamente a más estudiantes.
So our expectation is that in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to start welcoming back all our students. We are going to be doing this in 2 phases. The first phase is scheduled for Monday, March 22nd, with the 9th and 12th grade students. And then a couple of weeks later, on April 12th, we'll be welcoming the second phase group of students, which is our 10th and 11th grade students. It's important to note that while we are going to phase in the 9th and 12th grade students on March 22nd, our 10th and 11th grade cohorts will still be in effect during that transition. So if you have
Reagan, are you frozen?
Okay, so I think we just froze for a minute. Typical technology glitches, that's totally fine.
Martinez, the last thing we heard was that 10th and 11th grade can continue to come in.
Perfect, so that's true. So I'll let Mr. Castro go ahead and translate that part.
Entonces, la reapertura de las escuelas se divide en 2 fases. La primera fase le da la bienvenida a los estudiantes de 9º y de 12 grado, empezando el 22 de marzo. La segunda fase le da la bienvenida a los estudiantes de 10º y de 11 el 12 de abril. Entre el 22 de marzo y el 12 de abril, que es cuando vuelven ya los estudiantes de 10º y 11, dependiendo del color asignado para los 10º y de 11, igual pueden seguir viniendo. Si eran estudiantes que venían una vez a la semana o múltiples veces a la semana, por favor sigan con esos colores que ya venían asignados. Y ya pues empezando el 12 de abril vendrían de lleno los 5 días de la semana.
It's important to also note that these dates are our target dates. However, I've made it quite clear to our school community and our faculty that all of this is contingent upon our facilities being ready. And we'll talk about what that entails, which is the additional use of additional cafeteria tables, additional desks, additional barriers, and we'll get into the specifics shortly. But just know that that would be the only reason why we would need to push back if our building facility was not ready by the 22nd.
Las fechas que hemos escogido del 22 de marzo y del 12 de abril son las fechas que hasta el momento han sido planeadas. Pero si hay algún inconveniente y necesitamos aplazar estas fechas, es el único motivo por el cual lo haríamos, que sería si la escuela no tiene todo lo necesario para recibir a los estudiantes, ya sea que nos falte mesas adicionales o las barreras y de protección que tal vez no tengamos suficientes. Es el único motivo por el cual aplazaríamos la reapertura. De lo contrario, el 22 de marzo y el 12 de abril vuelven nuestros estudiantes.
So as you received a survey recently, you'll recall that we stated that the full reopening plan provides two options for our students for instruction. Option one is full-time in-person learning, and option two is full virtual students. So there will be no longer a choice or an opportunity to be a couple of days a week type of cohort. So that's really important. We're asking our families to select either full-time in-person or full virtual. Now, we've also had some questions in the past that talk about, choosing whether or not you can, if you're not ready to make that decision yet and you want to stay fully virtual and perhaps consider later on in person, that's totally fine. The key will be communicating with us that is your wish for your child to stay fully virtual and then eventually come in person when you as a family feels comfortable. But during full-time instruction, students will attend the 5 days per week. Students will continue to maintain their regular school schedule. And again, it's important for them to be consistently attending in person 5 days a week. Under the full virtual, students will be virtual all 5 days. Students will remain following their schedule as they have been. And there's going to continue to have synchronous opportunities. So students will log in and go ahead and log into their platforms, their Schoology platform, and perhaps also work having some Zoom meetings with their classes. So that's really important for us, that we wanted to make sure that we kept that as part of the platform and the approach to full virtual.
Las dos opciones que tenemos en el momento, acorde al cuestionario que se les mandó a los padres, son dos opciones. La primera opción es volver a la escuela a tiempo completo los 5 días de la semana, o la segunda opción es quedarse en casa 100% virtual los 5 días de la semana. Estas son las únicas dos opciones. La opción de venir en persona unos cuantos días a la semana y otros días desde casa no es una opción. Es o venir los 5 días en persona o quedarse en casa los 5 días. Para los estudiantes que vienen a la escuela en persona, el horario de clases que vienen siguiendo desde el comienzo del año seguirá siendo el mismo y esperamos que se comprometan a su asistencia de los 5 días de la semana. De lo contrario, si se van a quedar virtualmente, sería también la semana completa, su horario seguiría siendo el mismo y tendrían la oportunidad de entrar a las clases virtuales como venimos haciendo por Schoology o por Zoom.
The district has responded to the challenges this year in lots of different ways. And we wanted to just point those out to you, that one of the things that we have done, and I know you've experienced this, is that we have worked towards trying to find other opportunities or more opportunities for students to come in person. So we have created multiple different types of cohorts throughout the year, some of our struggling learners, some of our other types of learners that needed additional time. And so it has been a process that, with the goal of trying to eventually be all full in person, which we're certainly excited to be able to do in the coming weeks. We've also provided, in terms of most recently, what are we doing? We've provided opportunities for our staff to be vaccinated, those that want to and can be vaccinated. And that was really important for us in order to be able to move to this step. And I'm sure if you followed some of the reopening meetings, that has been discussed extensively as to that was one of the hurdles we needed to overcome. We are currently working on installing student barriers in the classrooms to be able to increase the number of students in the classrooms. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. We're also looking to improve our ventilation above already what is the minimum requirement in some of the areas that don't have, for example, windows that are operable. And we're also working on getting tents for outside spaces throughout the district, but at the high school specifically, we're looking at getting a tent over the senior courtyard and perhaps another couple of spaces, and that will allow us to have additional outdoor space in the spring, when the weather is more cooperative, because we cannot use those during inclement weather. When we talk about snow, we're not allowed to put those up. So that's why those will be in addition to, but are not a requirement in order for us to fully reopen. And of course, we are continuously cleaning our facilities and disinfecting our facilities on a pretty consistent basis and routine basis by our custodial team.
¿Cuáles son algunas de las cosas que el distrito ha estado haciendo durante todos estos meses para prepararnos para este momento en el que podamos recibir más estudiantes? Primeramente, desde el comienzo del año escolar, la escuela siempre ha encontrado maneras de ayudar a los estudiantes que necesitaban venir más días en persona. Originalmente, la mayoría de estudiantes venía una sola vez a la semana en persona, pero muchos estudiantes recibieron ya la oportunidad de poder venir más seguido en persona porque lo necesitaban, estaban bajo circunstancias especiales. Entonces, desde el comienzo ya hemos agregado más y más estudiantes que necesitaban el venir en persona más días. Aparte de esto, le hemos brindado a nuestra facultad varias oportunidades de recibir la vacuna para los que estaban interesados. Hemos instalado entre mesas, pupitres y también mesas en las cafeterías, unas barreras transparentes, unos divisores que separan a los estudiantes que están sentados el uno al lado del otro. Para los salones que tal vez no tienen suficiente ventilación o no tienen ventanas, simplemente porque así fueron diseñados desde antes, se les ha instalado un sistema de filtro marca HEPA para poder ayudar con la circulación del aire en esos salones. Aparte de eso, estamos planeando comprar carpas para instalar en los espacios que son al aire libre en la escuela. No hemos podido tener las carpas porque sabemos que el clima apenas empieza a subir en temperatura y apenas el clima nos los permita, estaremos buscando la manera de agregar carpas para crear espacios adicionales al aire libre para nuestros estudiantes. Y por último, continuamos la limpieza y continuamos desinfectando los salones de clases al final de cada día escolar.
As we continue to talk about our safety measures here, it's important to note that, well, I've already mentioned this, the air filtration systems that for certain spaces, we are encouraging and are asking our teachers to open up our windows to add that additional air circulation. Students and staff are still required to wear their masks at all times, with the exception of when they're eating. And I continuously am making those PSA announcements in the mornings, those PA announcements for students to be reminded of the proper mask etiquette throughout the building. And I will say that I'm proud to say that our mask compliance is way through the roof. It is at least, I want to say 99% of the time our students are wearing their masks appropriately. And, do we have to at times remind our students, absolutely, pull it up over your nose? Absolutely, as we would with any other thing. But it's really important to note that our kids are great and they do recognize the importance of mask wearing. So that's important to note. Hallway supervision is still something that, whether pandemic or not, we always want to continuously do. So we're certainly working with our security team to make sure that our hallways are being monitored, trying to remind our students and staff about social distancing. We are working to place barriers in classrooms. In fact, some of that work was done this weekend. So some of your students, your children might have already shared with you that most of their classrooms have student barriers on their desks already. We've already started to outfit some of our cafeterias with them. We are still looking for additional shipments of cafeteria tables so we can remove some of the student desks from the cafeterias to place back into the classrooms in order to accommodate our capacity in our classrooms. And of course, we will continue to work with our nursing team to make sure that we are monitoring the local transmission data and make any adjustments as necessary, as the district does as well. So all that would be done in concert with one another.
Además de lo que ya hemos mencionado, hay varias cosas que continuamos haciendo para asegurarnos de que nuestros estudiantes están seguros cuando vuelvan aquí a la escuela. Como habíamos mencionado antes, cada salón de clases ha recibido una actualización en el sistema de ventilación acorde a los requisitos del Estado y ciertos salones reciben, aparte de esto, un sistema de filtro marca HEPA para ayudar con la circulación del aire. Le estamos pidiendo a todos los maestros que si el clima lo permite, por favor que mantengan las ventanas abiertas para recibir aire fresco todo el tiempo. Sabemos que nuestra facultad y nuestros estudiantes están obligados a usar tapabocas o máscaras todo el tiempo. También estaremos supervisando los pasillos para asegurarnos de que no hayan demasiados estudiantes congregados al mismo tiempo. Los estudiantes los vamos a tratar de mantener tan separados los unos de los otros como sea posible, dentro del salón de clases y por fuera de los salones también. Cuando ellos estén sentados juntos en el salón o en la cafetería, están divididos por unas barreras protectoras color transparente. En las cafeterías, a cada estudiante se le va a asignar un lugar en el cual van a comer, y entre un estudiante y el otro existirán las barreras protectoras. Y por último, nuestras enfermeras se mantienen al día con las cifras más recientes de casos nuevos dentro de nuestra comunidad, y si el plan necesita cambiar, haremos los cambios necesarios acorde al número de casos que haya.
It's important to note, as you see some of these pictures, that our district was very conservative with its approach initially of masks and 6 feet apart. It's important to note that that is under the New York State requirements was certainly taking the conservative approach, because New York State requirements state that it's mask or 6 feet apart. So just know that while we are decreasing that 6 feet, and we cannot guarantee that most classrooms will be able to maintain that 6 feet. That's why we are taking that additional step of using barriers in the spaces, because you will have classrooms, as you can see, that we're closer looking to 3 feet apart being more that's going to be the norm. So that's important to note. Again, still within the guidelines and still within the CDC guidelines, as well as the New York State Department of Health. Certainly that'll be important to note that we are still within those guidelines.
Entonces, nuestro distrito desde el comienzo ha sido bastante estricto con las reglas que el Estado nos dio sobre el distanciamiento social y el uso de tapabocas. En realidad, la regla del Estado era que podían separar a los estudiantes 6 pies de distancia el uno del otro, o requerir el tapabocas. Nosotros hicimos ambos desde el comienzo, pero ahora que ya estamos preparándonos para recibir a más estudiantes, hay veces en que los estudiantes van a estar menos de 6 pies de distancia el uno del otro, pero obviamente seguiremos usando nuestras máscaras. Hay salones donde podemos separarlos 6 pies, pero hay salones donde por el espacio no se pueden separar a los estudiantes 6 pies. Por eso hemos agregado esas barreras transparentes que ven en la pantalla, y obviamente exigimos el uso de tapabocas todo el tiempo que estén dentro de la escuela.
So one of the other things that we continuously are doing is our COVID testing. We've been pretty successful testing our staff over the last couple of months, and we are now looking to move into testing a district-wide opportunity to test our students as well, those on a voluntary basis. So that will be an additional component. We are still quarantining as required to by CDC and DOH guidelines. So that's important to know. The one difference, and I know this was a question that was asked yesterday, is that we are looking to shift to trying to minimize the quarantining. So instead of impacting an entire classroom, it will be closer to who was in the vicinity that is considered an exposure. That was an exposure, and it was in close contact. So that will be a different shift that we'll see, that perhaps not an entire class will have to quarantine if we have a positive case in a classroom, or as we've been doing in the cafeteria spaces, just the surrounding students around that other positive student.
Entonces continuamos pidiéndole a nuestra facultad que se hagan la prueba del COVID al azar. Es una manera de asegurarnos que todos estamos seguros, no solamente la facultad, pero también los estudiantes. También vamos a comenzar a pedirle pruebas a los estudiantes que quieran. Es algo voluntario, hacerle pruebas al azar, asegurarnos de que nuestro número de casos en la escuela no suba más de lo que es seguro. La regla de cuarentena sigue siendo la misma, pero tratamos de minimizar el número de personas que hay que mandar en cuarentena. Antes se mandaba a grupos bastante grandes en cuarentena solamente para estar seguros, pero ahora lo que tratamos de hacer es solamente mandar en cuarentena a las personas que tuvieron contacto directo con la persona que salió positiva al COVID.
One of the other mitigation strategies that we've been using has been that we're looking to implement is about our hallways. We've had questions about our hallways and how will we handle a larger number of students coming into our hallways. So, you know, with the reopening committee, we've looked at staggering our transitional bells. So it's in between periods that will look different. And Mr. Vidiello will go ahead and explain that for us.
So what we've been able to do is we've been able to cut our advisory period on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday from 15 minutes to 10 minutes. And we've added 1 minute of additional passing time in between class periods. So instead of a 5-minute transition in between classes, there will be a 6-minute transition in between classes. And what that will look like is there will be 2 bells. The first bell will ring, and all students who are in an odd numbered classroom will be dismissed. And then 1 minute later, there will be a second bell, and all students in an even numbered classroom will be dismissed. So the students who will be dismissed at the second bell will still have 5 minutes, but there will be a total of 6-minute passing time to allow our hallways to, there are a few areas of the building where there's some bottlenecking, and we're trying to avoid that. In addition, on Wednesdays, we will also have a 6-minute passing time. However, in order to do that, we've had to eliminate our advisory period on Wednesday, and our Wednesday dismissal time will now be 11:12, and students will be dismissed by building at 11:12. There will be a 3-minute period, and the buses leave on Wednesday at 11:22. So once students are fully out at 11:15, they'll have 7 minutes to get to the bus.
Entonces, para poder asegurarnos de que no hayan demasiados estudiantes a la misma vez en los pasillos cuando van de un salón de clases al próximo, hemos tenido que cambiar un poquito el horario escolar. Al comienzo de cada día, por 15 minutos, los estudiantes reciben anuncios, información general de parte de sus maestros antes de que comienza la primera clase del día. Usualmente durábamos 15 minutos haciendo eso, ahora vamos a solamente durar 10 minutos. Y los 5 minutos que nos estamos ahorrando los vamos a agregar durante el día para los cambios de clase. Antes los estudiantes tenían 5 minutos para llegar de una clase a la otra. Ahora tendrán un poquito más de tiempo porque vamos a tener 2 campanas al final de cada periodo. Cuando toca la primera campana, los estudiantes que estén en salones que terminan con números impares salen a la próxima clase. Después toca una segunda campana y salen de los salones los estudiantes que estén en salones que terminan con números pares. La idea es que no hayan demasiados estudiantes en espacios pequeños en los pasillos durante el cambio de clases. Los miércoles sabemos que ya de por sí era un día corto, pero tuvimos también que hacer unos cambios. Los miércoles en las mañanas ya no habrá anuncios de parte de los maestros y también la salida es un poquito más temprana. La última campana tocará a las 11:12 de la mañana y los buses saldrán de la escuela ya para las 11:22. Nuevamente la idea es quitar tiempo de donde no se necesita para agregarlo a los cambios de clases durante el día.
Some of the updated cafeteria procedures, and again, this is something that most of our Tigers already are familiar with. So some of this is reinforcement and the other parts are new. So we acknowledge that our current spaces have been the H cafeteria, B1 cafeteria, and the atrium. We've added the staff cafeteria as an additional space to accommodate our students. We are also, as I mentioned earlier, using those student barriers, those plastic barriers between our students in order to accommodate more students in the spaces. We are certainly going to continue to use our QR codes that our students have been using. And again, we ask our parents to make sure that reminding your child the importance of completing those QR codes, because that helps let us know where they were sitting in case they test positive or somebody else tests positive, that we know who we need to quarantine. That's really important. We are purchasing additional tables to be able to accommodate more students, and again, to place more barriers on them. Again, the importance of reiterating the etiquette, the expectations, no different than a restaurant, which is you put your mask on when you're not eating, and certainly when you're standing up and going to throw things out, or when you're walking through, we're reminding our students to keep their masks on. Absolutely, we will allow students to take advantage of the outdoors when weather is cooperative. So that'll be really important, and we are certainly continuing to work on that plan, whether it's the courtyards, whether it is outside of the current cafeterias. We are certainly working with our reopening team to facilitate that, and we're looking to do that as soon as possible, even before the reopening, because we are recognizing we're trying to take advantage of the nice weather days that are ahead of us in the next coming weeks, and certainly continuously sanitizing and cleaning our tables between our lunch periods, which we have been doing.
Nuestro plan para las cafeterías es el siguiente. Ahora mismo tenemos 3 cafeterías disponibles. Ya agregamos una 4ª cafetería recientemente en preparación para recibir a más estudiantes. Obviamente, cuando los estudiantes están sentados en las mesas, estarán siendo separados por esas barreras protectoras. Cada mesa tiene un código el cual el estudiante debe escanear, que es una manera de nosotros saber quién entró a esa cafetería. En caso de que alguien salga positivo al COVID, sabremos quién estuvo en la cafetería durante el mismo periodo con ese estudiante o con esa persona. Estamos comprando mesas adicionales, barreras adicionales para agregar a nuestras cafeterías. Obviamente, ya cuando el clima se ponga más calentito, podemos empezar a ver la opción de que los estudiantes coman afuera, al aire libre. Los estudiantes van a estar siendo supervisados durante el almuerzo por nuestra facultad y deben seguir las reglas. Por favor, recuérdenles que deben tener su máscara puesta durante el tiempo que están en la cafetería, excepto cuando están comiendo. Pero si se van a poner de pie para ir a la basura, a botar algo, necesitan nuevamente ponerse el tapabocas. Y por último, entre un periodo de almuerzo y el próximo, las mesas son desinfectadas por nuestra facultad.
The next slides talk about the instructional model that we are using and we will continue to use. And it's important to note that we believe that it's really important for our fully virtual students to still feel connected to the classroom. And that is why we are going to maintain that half-day Wednesdays in order to provide our teachers additional time to plan for working in a hybrid setting, working with students that are fully virtual, and certainly working with students that are in person. While the difference will be at this time when we shift is that we recognize that we'll have more students in the classroom versus at home. And that means that things will look different for a fully virtual student. And what we mean by that is that a student who's fully virtual might need to recognize that they need to be there on time because the teacher might not be right at the desk in order to allow them into the Zoom. But also because they're going to have to be a little bit more active when it comes to asking a question in the classroom because the teacher, again, might not be at the desk and using the chat feature might not get the teacher's attention. So we want to encourage our fully virtual students to make sure that they unmute themselves and ask a question out loud because the teacher might be in front of the board or in front or somewhere in the classroom as well. So that's really important to note as one of the major changes that will occur. But again, we will still be asking our families to utilize, as well as we ask our teachers to utilize Schoology as our platform for assignments, calendars, and all those different things that it's used for. Because again, we are still dealing with both in-person students and virtual students. So that's really important. So they will still be posting all that information on Schoology as the go-to platform.
Para nosotros es muy importante que los estudiantes que decidan quedarse virtualmente sigan sintiéndose como parte de nuestra escuela, siguen siendo nuestros estudiantes y nuestra labor es educarlos aunque estén desde casa. Obviamente ahora vamos a recibir a más estudiantes en persona. Antes había más estudiantes en casa, ahora habrá más estudiantes en persona. Entonces la atención del maestro va a ser un poquito diferente, porque ahora el maestro tiene que atender a más niños en persona y menos niños en el computador. Esto simplemente requiere de que los estudiantes que están en casa participando virtualmente se aseguren de pedirle al maestro su atención, ya sea quitándole el silenciador a su micrófono y diciendo, maestro, tengo una pregunta, por favor, ¿me puede repetir esto? O sea, necesitamos que los estudiantes que van a estar virtualmente se hagan responsables de pedirle la atención al maestro, porque es muy posible que el maestro ahora va a estar más ocupado con los estudiantes que estarán en persona porque el número será más grande. Ya no estará pendiente del chat o tan pendiente pantalla del computador. También obviamente seguimos con los miércoles siendo mediodía, porque esto le regala mediodía a los maestros de poder ayudar a los estudiantes personalmente si no entendieron algo, de prepararse para la próxima clase y demás. Es muy importante para nosotros que los estudiantes que están desde casa reciban la misma educación que los que están aquí en persona.
Thank you. So spring break is another important note, something that we'd like to make a note of, that the district does not intend on moving to a remote week, a learning week after spring break. The data shows that the community spread remains low even after the midwinter break, as we just had. So parents and guardians will be reminded, as they were right before February's break, that to make sure that they're following the guidelines for quarantining with travel. So that's really important to know.
Sabemos que ya pronto viene nuestras vacaciones de primavera y queremos dejarles saber que el distrito no planea que la semana que regresemos de esas vacaciones sea una semana virtual para todos. Vimos que después del descanso que tuvimos en febrero, el número de casos dentro de la comunidad no aumentó lo suficiente para tener que hacer esto. Por favor, les pedimos, si van a estar viajando durante esa semana libre, que por favor sigan las reglas de cuarentena cuando vuelvan de sus viajes.
Okay. We're now going to get into some of the questions that were submitted by parents, but I want to put into perspective the numbers, because I know that that's a question that folks have been wanting to know. So we were really successful with our survey responses from parents. We had approximately 1,300 parents respond to our survey about in-person versus virtual, and approximately 2/3 of our school is planning on returning. So we are anticipating that even though we have 1,200 out of the 2,100 plus families in our school, that we're anticipating about 2/3. However, we will be prepared for all our students, but we know that that's not the reality. The reality is that we have some families that are choosing to stay virtual for the remainder of the year. They've been virtual for most of the year. So roughly, I would say 2/3 of our students we're anticipating coming back if that trend holds. So that's important to know.
Sabemos que el cuestionario que recibieron los padres pidiéndoles que escojan si sus hijos van a seguir virtualmente o si van a volver en persona, es un cuestionario que recibimos de respuesta más de 1,000 respuestas de padres. Tenemos más de 2,000 estudiantes y recibimos 1,300 respuestas de ustedes. Muchísimas gracias. Y basado en esas respuestas, nos dimos cuenta que 2/3 de nuestros estudiantes quieren volver en persona. Estamos preparados para recibirlos a todos nuestros estudiantes, pero sabemos que hay un gran número que prefiere todavía quedarse virtualmente y comprendemos. Entonces, 2/3 de la escuela planea volver en persona empezando el 22 de marzo o el 12 de abril.
Thank you. So the first question was asked by parents is, why not juniors versus freshmen? Or another group. And I will say this, as the principal, I understand, our junior parents' question and appreciate it. I think there's a valid argument for why every single grade can benefit from coming in the first phase. The reality is that, it was determined based on just some pure data in terms of our support systems that we have in place. Which grade was being referred to the most, and that was our 9th graders. So we recognize that our seniors who have a very short window left of their high school experience wanted to get them in first, but the other group that we felt was also in need was a group that has not really had their first high school year experience in a way that we would all want it to be. So we wanted to get them in as our youngest Tigers in first with the seniors.
Una de las preguntas que recibimos de padres es ¿por qué escogimos que los de 9º y 12 grado fueran los 2 primeros grupos en volver? Obviamente los de 12 grado los escogimos porque ya no les queda mucho tiempo con nosotros y queremos que puedan disfrutar un poquito de este último año de secundaria. Y la pregunta en específica dice, ¿por qué los de 9º y no los de 11 grado? El 11 grado es un año muy importante, especialmente en preparación para la universidad. Y la realidad es que escogimos a los de 9º porque de todos los grados de la secundaria, los estudiantes de noveno son los que más han tenido dificultades académicas este año. Lo sabemos porque cada vez que un estudiante está teniendo problemas académicos, se reúne un grupo de personas para ver cómo podemos ayudarle, y de todos los estudiantes que recomendaron para recibir más ayuda, el número más grande venía de noveno grado.
All right, Mr. Vidiello, you want to take this one?
Sure. So our next question is about quarantining and how that will work. Of course, when a student is sick, we encourage the student to stay home. He or she can log in remotely if they are well enough to do so and want to participate from home. They will be marked present virtually. In terms of quarantining, we are working with our teachers and our nursing staff. Teachers have been asked to create seating charts moving forward so that if an individual is identified as being COVID-19 positive, we would only need to quarantine the students who are directly around that individual as opposed to a whole class.
Esa pregunta sobre cómo funcionará la cuarentena cuando algún estudiante o algún maestro salga positivo al COVID. Primero que todo, queremos recordarles que si sus hijos no se sienten bien de salud, por favor no los manden a la escuela. Si se sienten con suficiente ánimos de participar desde casa, están más que bienvenidos de participar virtualmente. Se les marcará presente en la ausencia, algo que se llama presente virtualmente. Segundo que todo, le estamos pidiendo a los maestros que por favor creen unas gráficas de sus salones y que escriban quiénes se sientan en qué mesas. Para así, si un estudiante sale positivo al COVID, nosotros podemos fácilmente saber cuáles eran los estudiantes que estaban alrededor de esa persona. Así no tenemos que mandar en cuarentena a tantas personas que no necesiten, solamente los que estuvieron en contacto directo con la persona que salió enferma.
Okay, the next question. There are different return dates scheduled for 9th grade and 12th grade students and 10th and 11th grade. Is there any flexibility in those 5 days attendance start dates for families who have 2 children at the high school in grades with different start dates? All these questions are really talking about can some students still do hybrid kind of days while we have, during this time? Let's figure out.
So I think with the first question, when you have 2 children in 2 different grades, again, the 9th graders and the 12th graders are going to be coming in on March 22nd. If you do have a 10th grader or an 11th grader, they are going to continue coming in with their original cohort until they are phased in. When it says, would my child have to return full-time on 4/12, or could they choose to return at a later date? You can absolutely choose to return at a later date. Again, if you could stay in communication with your student's house administrator and the school counselor, that would be helpful. So we do have a better understanding of when they are going to be returning full-time in person. Can my child go to school 2 days per week and work from home for 3 days per week? Again, we are encouraging all parents to make the commitment to sending their students to school 5 days per week or committing to a strictly virtual schedule. So the answer to that is not at this time. Again, we are looking for the parent to make that commitment to send the student every day. And if a student has chosen to be fully in person, will they be allowed to some days participate virtually from home and be marked present virtually? With that, again, if the student is not feeling well and they do need to stay home, they are able to log into their classes virtually, of course, and use the platform that they have been using when they're working remotely from home. So if they do need to stay home and are unable to get to the building that day, then the answer is yes, they will be able to participate from home and attend the classes virtually.
En pantalla tenemos 4 preguntas. La primera es, si tengo un hijo que necesita volver a la escuela en persona el 22 de marzo, pero tengo otro que vuelve el 12 de abril, si puedo esperar y mandarlos a ambos empezando el 12 de abril. La realidad es que los de noveno y 12 vuelven el 22 de marzo, y si usted tiene un hijo o una hija que está en 10º y 11, ellos pueden continuar viniendo entre el 22 de marzo y el 12 de abril, los días o el día que ya se les había asignado. Si quiere esperar y mandarlos juntos, empezando el 12 de abril, entendemos. Segunda pregunta es, ¿tengo que mandar a mi hijo o a mi hija empezando el 12 de abril o puedo esperar? Ustedes tienen esa opción. Si no se sienten todavía listos para mandar a sus hijos en persona, si quieren unas semanas más, está bien, pero le pedimos que por favor se comuniquen con nosotros, con el administrador o con el consejero de su hijo, por favor, para saber cuándo piensan volver en persona nuevamente. La tercera pregunta es, ¿será que puedo mandar a mi hijo 2 días en persona a la escuela y 3 días desde casa? No. Estamos pidiéndole a los padres de familia, por favor, que se comprometan con una de las dos opciones, o 5 días en la escuela o 5 días en la casa. Para la última pregunta, obviamente si el estudiante no se siente bien de salud y es un estudiante que viene en persona y prefiere quedarse ese día participando desde casa porque no se siente bien, por supuesto pueden hacer eso. De lo contrario, si escogió la opción de venir en persona, por favor en persona los 5 días.
So our next questions, we've covered this already, but we just want to reiterate that yes, students should go to school on their assigned days until reopening takes place. If a student is exhibiting symptoms of a cold, we encourage he or she to stay home. If they feel well enough to log on and participate remotely, they may do so. And buses are in effect now. There will be a slight adjustment to the Wednesday bus time. But buses are definitely in effect now and are functioning. Bus capacity will increase a bit as more students come in, but the district has been working with the bus company to get more buses so that we are still able to transport students safely.
Muchas de estas preguntas ya han recibido respuesta. Si su hijo no se siente bien, por favor que se quede en casa. Si se siente lo suficientemente bien para participar virtualmente, que lo haga. Sí tenemos buses y obviamente vamos a estar recibiendo más estudiantes en persona. Entonces ya estamos trabajando con la compañía del bus para agregar más buses a cada ruta y así poder transportar a todos los estudiantes que vienen a la escuela empezando finales de este mes de una manera segura.
In terms of lockers, students will not yet be using lockers. The same is true for water fountains. Our water fountains will not be in use for students.
Para las preguntas de si los estudiantes pueden usar casilleros o las fuentes de agua, la respuesta es no, no estaremos usando ninguno de los dos.
We've received a lot of questions about PE, specifically aquatics. Our PE classes and aquatics classes will essentially remain the same or very similar to how they are currently running. Students will participate with masks and they will follow guidelines of 6 feet apart with low impact activity and 12 feet apart for higher aerobic activity.
Recibimos muchas preguntas sobre las clases de educación física, en especial la clase de natación. La clase de natación continuará haciendo lo que viene siendo desde el comienzo del año escolar, simplemente unas actividades de ejercicio, no es en realidad natación como lucía antes de esta pandemia. Los estudiantes que están en esa clase, si están haciendo un ejercicio que no es de gran impacto, van a estar separados por 6 pies. Si es una actividad que es muy de aeróbicos, estarán separados por 12 pies de distancia y obviamente tendrán que usar sus tapabocas todo el tiempo.
In the area of band and orchestra, we've received some questions. In accordance with state requirements, we will ensure that students will remain a distance of 12 feet apart in all directions between individuals while playing instruments or singing or playing a wind instrument. If students are not able to be 12 feet apart, then they will not be playing or singing at school. String instruments can play with a distance of 6 feet apart.
Para los padres que tienen estudiantes en bandas, orquesta, en cualquier clase de música, por favor sepa que para los estudiantes que cantan o que tocan instrumentos de viento, lo que requiere el Estado es que estén distanciados 12 pies en cualquier dirección. Y esa es la regla que estaremos siguiendo. Si no hay suficiente espacio para distanciar a estos estudiantes 12 pies, simplemente no estaremos haciendo esa actividad. Para los estudiantes que tocan instrumentos de cuerda, solamente se pide que estén distanciados 6 pies.
So, Mr. Video, I think we answered this question.
We did answer this question.
Already about the outside, absolutely, we will promote that. The one thing we do want to mention is that, again, to aid with our capacity issues in our cafeterias, we are going to allow seniors to leave campus. They'll have that. We will be offering them a permission to leave form that will be completed by you. So be on the lookout for that, folks. That'll be, I'm sure we'll be getting that out by our house administrators over the next week or so to get that out to families to sign. I do want to emphasize that it is a privilege, because we want to make sure that our students are coming back on time for their classes. And if certainly that becomes an issue, we will, take that privilege away from our Tigers, but we hope not to. We know that they do the right thing all the time. So just note that we will allow them to leave campus for their lunch, and certainly that'll be important for them to obviously still practice the appropriate, social distancing guidelines and certainly wearing masks. So we do feel that our senior Tigers deserve an opportunity to leave campus.
Las preguntas sobre el almuerzo creo que ya hemos dado bastantes respuestas sobre esto. Apenas podamos, tendremos la opción de que los estudiantes coman al aire libre. Por ahora el clima no lo ha permitido. Los estudiantes en su último año, los estudiantes de 12 grados, sí tendrán permiso de salir durante la hora del almuerzo y volver a la escuela. Obviamente esto es un privilegio, es un lujo que queremos que los estudiantes en su último año puedan tener, pero si se vuelve algo problemático, quitaremos ese lujo, ese privilegio. De lo contrario, esperamos que los estudiantes se comporten a la altura y usen sus tapabocas cuando estén saliendo y entrando de la escuela.
So our next question is, once a child is fully in person, if your child needs to quarantine, then yes, absolutely, they will continue to operate as a remote student until they are able to come back from quarantine.
Si un estudiante viene en persona, pero por algún motivo tiene que entrar en cuarentena, si es fácil que participe virtualmente, la respuesta es sí. Sigue siendo una opción, simplemente entrarían a las clases desde casa.
Classroom surfaces, we've had a few questions about that. Classroom surfaces will not be cleaned in between each class period and student. That's important to know. They will be cleaned at the end of the day, as they always are. Our cafeteria space will be cleaned in between lunch periods.
La pregunta si las mesas de los salones van a ser desinfectadas al final de cada periodo de clases, la respuesta es no. Las mesas de las cafeterías serán limpiadas al final de cada periodo de almuerzo, pero los salones de clases se desinfectan al final del día escolar.
All right, so the next question is regarding AP exams. It says, if a student chooses to be a remote learner, can that student take in-person AP exams, or must they take the remote option? So this year we are encouraging all students who are currently in an AP class to take the AP exam in person here at the building. Of course, if there are extenuating circumstances and a student is unable to come into the building for the exam, they will have the option of taking the AP exam digitally from home. There are some exceptions this year with some exams that are not offered digitally at all. We will be having a parent Q&A session this afternoon today at 4 p.m. And I will put that Zoom information into the chat if there are any AP parents here on the call this morning that would like to join us today at 4 p.m.
Para los padres con estudiantes en clases de AP, la pregunta es si un estudiante es virtual pero quiere tomar el examen de AP en persona, si se puede, la respuesta es sí. De por sí preferimos que los estudiantes vengan a tomar sus exámenes de AP con nosotros en persona. Si por algún motivo no pueden, entendemos, y la opción de tomar el examen virtualmente desde casa sigue siendo una opción, aunque hay exámenes que no se ofrecen virtualmente. Tenemos más información sobre los exámenes de AP este año en una reunión el día de hoy a las 4 de la tarde. Por favor, asistan si tienen hijos que están en clases de AP.
Our next question is about activities, proms, graduations. Of course, we welcome all of our students, whether they are in-person students or remote students. They are absolutely permitted to attend any in-person activities that do take place.
Para los estudiantes que están virtualmente, padres preguntan si van a poder asistir a ciertas actividades en persona, como la graduación, el prom y demás actividades del último año. La respuesta es sí, aunque hayan decidido recibir sus clases virtualmente. Si quieren disfrutar de esas actividades en persona, por supuesto que pueden.
And our last question that we'll answer today is about athletics. We had a few folks ask about baseball, and the answer is yes, it is scheduled to begin on April 19th. And when speaking with Mr. Cameron, he asked me to share that if anybody has specific questions or concerns related to athletics, if you please reach out directly to him. His contact information is right here on this slide and can also be found on our website.
La última pregunta es si habrá temporada de béisbol. La respuesta es sí. La temporada comenzará el 19 de abril. El señor Matt Cameron es el director de todos los deportes y aquí en pantalla ven la información, su correo electrónico. Por favor, cualquier pregunta, no duden en contactarlo.
So that concludes our questions and answers from parents submitted. I want to just, close with just a couple of words. So I think it's important for us to recognize that this phase, this full reopening phase, is going to, be no different than our reopening in September, where again we know a lot more today than we did then, and that this is something that we are working in. It's a work in progress, and we don't have all the answers. There is no roadmap per se to reopen a school, and certainly a school of our size. But what I will say is that this should be an exciting moment for us, because we are finally coming back to a place where we wanted to be, right? Where we are welcoming back all our students, all our Tigers that want to be here, and we're also going to support those students that feel they want to stay virtual, and that's okay. I think one of the things that I said yesterday is that we're leading in these conversations and our plans. We have folks that reach out to us, other high schools that reach out to us and ask us how we're doing things. So that's really exciting and really something that we should be proud of as a school and as a community. That while we are leading, that means that there's nobody that we can lean to get some of these answers. So it's going to be bumpy, just like it was in the fall. And what we ask from parents is to have that patience and grace to be able to allow the flexibility for our teachers and us to be able to navigate through this. Our reopening committee will still meet throughout the months of April and May, and if we need to make some tweaks, we certainly will. So just know that we appreciate the feedback, and just again, have that patience, and that your child's instruction might look a little different the first couple of weeks. There might be a need for the teacher to recalibrate and talk about expectations in the classroom. So if you're a virtual student, that might look a little different for you. So again, our families, we thank you for your collaboration and your support through this very challenging year. But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I want to thank you again for being part of this morning and for your continued support.
Queremos darle las gracias a los padres por toda la ayuda que nos han brindado en estos meses tan difíciles. Sentimos que ya por fin hay un poquito de luz al final de toda esta oscuridad que hemos estado pasando. Entendemos que el volver a recibir más estudiantes es algo emocionante, pero a la misma vez requiere bastante paciencia. Así que le pedimos por favor a los padres y a los estudiantes que sean pacientes con nosotros, con los maestros. Nunca hemos pasado por algo así, nunca hemos vivido algo así, entonces es muy difícil planear algo por lo cual nunca has pasado. Hay otras escuelas que nos preguntan a nosotros qué es lo que va a hacer White Plains, entonces deberíamos sentirnos orgullosos de que somos líderes de cierta manera, pero a la misma vez ser los primeros en hacer algo no siempre es fácil. Pedimos colaboración y paciencia para los maestros y continuaremos viendo cómo nos está yendo a medida de que recibimos más estudiantes. Si necesitamos hacer cambios, lo haremos. Por favor, sean pacientes.
Thank you.
Gracias.